Alrighty, we're going to get started. We're starting a little late, but like I said, I just finished putting this together, and I kind of put it together fairly hurried, so may not have all the information in it, but we can kind of fill that in as we discuss, because it is a collective, our collective energy. And we've talked about this. Usually when somebody has come across something, somebody else, at least one other person in the group, is kind of going on a similar thing. And what's that doctor, Sheldrick? A European doctor who studied, like they call it, a morphogenic field. A family has a morphogenic field. Illnesses are in the morphogenic field. Consciousness patterns in the morphogenic field. So when you're a part of a group, you're part of a morphogenic field. So the cool thing about that is when you have, or somebody else has an idea, you get that energetically or unconsciously. And since we're plugged in together, it's not all thoughts, but if you're focused together in a particular way, then you're open to receiving those ideas. And since everything is a collective, we're open to not only the positive ideas, but also the negative ones from the larger morphogenic field, which we call humanity. And we're going to be looking at the morphogenic field, even though I didn't use that term in this. But we're really going to be looking at that today because, we've been talking about Eden and returning to Eden, or actually it went from returning to Eden to reawakening to Eden. And this has been on my consciousness probably since the beginning of the year, so it unfolds in different ways. And I get a lot of information in sessions. We're going to play with some stuff today regarding what I got in sessions and talking with some people. Today I kind of had an awakening too, or just because it keeps expanding on itself. So what we're focusing, remember we did the big blood moon ceremony? There was like 21 people, a couple people that weren't there that participated. That was like amazing, because we usually don't have 21 people together. A lot of that intent behind that, for me, was to be in sync with spirit, but also with the earth too. And a lot of the focus was, in my own consciousness, was helping Wichita Falls be in alignment with its intended Eden presence. And I don't think it's an accident that all of a sudden, about a month and a half later, the lake goes from being freaking almost low as hell, empty, to full, fucking full, right? So we're, yeah, and the rain has just been insane ever since. Good. I mean, and the thing about that is, I think to a certain degree, consciousness-wise, I was thinking about Wichita Falls. People are like, oh, rain, pray for rain. But then the other part of them is going, but no tornadoes, no bad weather. Well, you can't have one without the other. So if you're like, give me that, but you're like, don't give me that. Yeah. You can, but if you're like praying for it, but then you dismiss it because that could happen. What were you going to say, Jim?
No, I was just going along with
Okay. So we're gonna talk about today Eden's intended splendor.
But I will point out this is the last day of the mythology day.
That's true.
Really?
51715.
After today, it changes?
51715.
Then they'll go to
Same backwards
From the
and
backwards.
forward.
All week long it's been telling them.
51715.
But it will still be-
51715.
Yeah, but it'll be 51815.
Yeah, until we hit 2 more days. 2 more days. But that is interesting. That's kind of come in the same time period. As above, so below, as you could think about it. So Eden, what Eden was intended to be, and this is just my rambling. Of course, everybody's a part of this, and the group is how everybody's energy comes together. It's not mine leading it. I'm just kind of providing the place for us to expand and play. So Eden, and this comes from something I've done earlier. Now that you're here on Earth, you are taught by the local natives, aka your parents, teachers, and society, how to behave in order to fit in. They feed you false fruit, ignorance from the tree of knowledge, the same fruit from the same tree they are fed. This is the beginning of your fall from a graceful existence. Feed from this tree, and it strengthens your false feeling of separation. The fruit also fuels the you versus me machine, an existence where unity is replaced with the mindset of you judge me and I will judge you. So eating, like in Genesis, the tree of the knowledge of good and bad. That's a judgmental perception. So in my perception, you know, the entire planet is the Garden of Eden. So we weren't kicked out of it. It's impossible to be out of the garden. It's only our perceptions that have interfered with that. And we're really going to get into perceptions here, because I'm beginning to understand more and more what we were meant to be. As a result of eating from the tree of judgment, you were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. You're not thrown out of the garden because you were bad, but because your newfound judgments cloud your ability to see the beauty of the garden and that every person is your brother or sister. That's a bad place to be, since the Garden of Eden is not a place on the earth, but the entire earth. We've been talking about returning to Eden recently. I started getting some information on how this also relates and translates into our bodies as well. And like I said, if y'all have some ideas or something you want to throw in, feel free to do that. Basically what has happened is that we have amended ourselves into imprisonment. We have amended the Constitution that is our true self. These amendments are limiting the expression of our true self. So we're going to get into that. You know how I love to play with words. The Constitution, right there we have the Constitution of the United States, which has been, by the way, amended to the point that you don't even recognize it anymore. But the same thing is, it is simply a reflection of what has happened to our intended spiritual constitution that is amended to death, that we don't even know who we are anymore. Our true splendor is gone out the window, just like the true splendor of what the Constitution was meant to accomplish for people. So Constitution is the act or process of composing or setting up or establishing the composition or structure or something, its makeup. The physical makeup of a person having a strong constitution. She had no trouble climbing the mountain. So it's what we're made of. The system of fundamental laws and principles that prescribes the nature, function, and limits of a government or other institution, which would also be our nature, our function, our limitations or not limitations. The document in which a system is recorded. So the Constitution, the supreme law of the United States, consisted of the document ratified by the original 13 states in 1787, 1790. And it says the subsequent amendments. So, but the amendment...
The amendments were there in the beginning.
Right. But the amendments have actually taken the simple truth, which actually fit on one piece of paper, okay, to now being God knows how many pieces of paper, filing cabinets worth of pieces of paper, that really no longer, if you read it all, has anything to do with the original Constitution. But to me, everything is a reflection. That we can look at that and go, oh, they fucked that up. That's simply a reflection of us being fucked up and us rewriting our basic Constitution to the point that we don't even know who the hell we are anymore. So Constitution, we have amended our true spiritual selves to the point that we are dense and shadowy representations of ourselves. Just like the United States Constitution has been amended so many times and in so many ways that it no longer resembles or represents its true self and intent. People bitch about the government, but they are merely a large mirror of what we have done to ourselves. They are the manifestation of self-deceit and self-defeat. As we return or reawaken to the earth's true identity as a sacred living organism and her true intended magnificence called Eden, so too must we return to our intended splendor. Over time, amendments to our constitutions have weakened and limited us. These amendments have dropped us down from being beings of light and awareness, conscious beings, to beings of darkness and ignorance. We have become dense physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. We are no longer light. We have become heavy and weighed down. These amendments and appendages, it came to me earlier, I started calling them appendages, to our Constitution, which is basically what our DNA is made of, are consciousness constructs. So basically it's all consciousness that runs the show, but these consciousness constructs, as we in this group know, consciousness manifests as physical reality. So at the very core of it, though, these amendments and appendages are simply consciousness constructs like perceptions, judgments, expectations, and beliefs. Yeah, Beth?
Remember when you did the Merkaba and you showed us how the black hole, which goes down, of our
Yeah, like the toroidal field around
Yes,
us. Yeah,
and
yeah.
as down through the middle are our chakras, and then often there are chakra, the different,
Shapes.
what did you call them? You said
Seals?
sometimes you get filters.
Yeah, seals or filters.
Yeah, and we need those to open and
Right.
go away. So this is reminding me of those. See your
Yeah.
appendages are blocking that DNA. from
Right.
being
So
open.
yeah, so that's a good point, Beth. So yeah, because it goes across the board. So these amendments are also filters that instead of having this energy pouring straight through us and the chakras
In
being
the truest
chambers,
sense.
right? Then basically we filter it. So it's like this filter has a new something blocked on it, and instead of energy pouring through us as intently as it could or intensely as it could, it's bottlenecked off. It doesn't go all the way through even.
Like we want the rain to not stop.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
we've got to,
hmm However, these amendments don't just stay on the conscious, mental, and emotional level of our being. Through the process of epigenesis, we terraform, or what I call terrorform, our bodies by rewriting the original, origin of all, DNA scripts. Our DNA has become our prison. The human being and DNA were never meant to be so dense.
In simple words, what is epigenesis?
Oh, thank you for that, because that makes I'm going to make this a YouTube video, and that way I can throw it in. Epigenesis is a term that kind of came in about 5 years ago, and they're looking at it in one particular way, but this conscious group knows it's a different way. They basically, a habit that you have, okay, let me give you an example. Let's say you start really eating a bunch of fat. You eat a bunch of fat to the point that you get high cholesterol, okay? Then you have children. Basically, you can pass on that gene trait that you wrote into your DNA. So in other words, a physical habit will rewrite your DNA system.
Okay.
So it becomes like, this is who I am, okay? The cool thing about that is epigenesis also, if you look at it the other way, means that we can undo things that have been written into the program. And to me, any appendage, any amendment that has ever been made to the DNA is simply an epigenic. Okay? In other words, high cholesterol, all these things that we look at, things that happen in humanity, happen because of consciousness constructs. Consciousness constructs that when rearranged and changed, the epigenesis goes away completely, because that's what rewrites it. Because the person that all of a sudden starts eating a bunch of fat is eating a bunch of fat for consciousness, mental, emotional reasons, and those transform into an action that actually changes the DNA to a point that it's actually passable to someone else. That's how much power we have.
If genesis means beginning, start, what is
Epi is adding to it. It's like adding to it, rewriting or changing.
which is where appendix came in and where appendages came in. Like when we append the concept.
We add something to it.
Okay.
That's why I put the
But-
amendments to the Constitution.
Yeah, that's where that all came from. And then what I was thinking too, is this a good example of epigenesis? When we hear people say, my mom had breast cancer, my grandma had breast cancer, so I'm going to get it.
hmm
They almost turn that on.
Yeah, I think you can turn on those DNA pathways. And Bruce Lipton, who I love, came across him years ago. Dr. Bruce Lipton, he really gets into the DNA, how it really works. I think one of his is Biology of Belief is a popular book, but he really gets into the patterns of how these things happen. And how he got into it is he was a cell biologist, and he was messing with cells, and he took the nucleus out of the cell, which we tend to think the nucleus is the brain of the cell. So he took what he thought was the brain out of the cell, and the cell still lived for a while. What come to find out is that the nucleus isn't the brain, it was the reproductive system. The joke being that, of course, men thought the reproductive system was the brain. But what turns out is that the membrane of the cell is the brain. It's all of us completely together. Our auric field is part of our brain. It's the membrane, it's the memory brain, not necessarily what's inside. So, but the DNA, but the nucleus is what holds the DNA, and the DNA is what tells the body what to do.
Okay. In your opinion, at where you are just right now,
Yeah.
in your opinion, does every thought and feeling that takes place in an individual, does that make
Epigenetics?
slight alterations?
Hell yeah, it does. All the time.
Well,
And the
you're
longer that
filtering
it's...
then, right? Because it's like, then I'm gonna get breast cancer, so I filter everything through my, I'm gonna get breast cancer filter, right?
And the longer it's there, like Mammy said, that's true. The longer it's there, the more it's implanted. For example, let's say, and this is just how I kind of do these brain trips for myself, just to kind of think on things. But imagine 100 years ago, a female was taking care of her children. Her husband died in the war, and she was left alone to take care of her family, and she had to make certain sacrifices to make that happen. Okay? The way she lived, the way her patterns were, how she did everything was then passed to her children. And then that carried forward. But she was the originator of the epigenetic change, but then it was carried forward just because it became, and the longer it stays in a line, the stronger it gets, in my opinion.
The longer it stays in.
So if something happened 200 years ago in your genetic line, and it's been passed ever since then, in your ancestry, and it's been passed ever since, it gains strength until someone says no. Like the son that is like a boy that is the son of a physical abuser. If he stops it, he changes that pattern and changes epigenetics and everything. So we have the ability to change the future if we're conscious enough to stop the pattern, because epigenetics happens. Epigenetics is basically the rewriting or the writing on top of the scripts that are in your DNA. The scripts that say do this, do that, do that. How we process, how we function. So epigenetics is writing on top of that and interfering with the natural function of who the hell you are. It's not natural to have high cholesterol. It's not natural to be diabetic. No diseases are natural. No diseases are natural, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Can we clarify that when she said every thought?
What?
Every. Okay.
Again,
But every thought and every that dictates every action
Well, now,
can
okay,
be
so-
positive or negative
So
to our.
let's clarify that.
Okay.
Let's clarify that just a little bit, because I have lots of thoughts.
yeah.
Mine. Okay, now, didn't Abraham say it takes how many seconds for something to solidify, 17, was it?
14, 15, 17, yeah.
17? Okay, so if you have a thought and you do not entertain that thought and you let that thought go, now that's a different story.
Yeah.
So I want to clarify that every, she said every, and that's.
Well, and yeah, because it goes back to the longer it's there,
Yeah.
whether the thought is in your head longer or if it's in your ancestry longer, the more it's going to be manifesting.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens are those patterns get passed to you. My mom did it this way. My mom did that. And even if you don't try to, you're going to pass those traits just based on your actions, because children are emotional beings, not mental beings. They go on how it feels, and they mimic that, especially between the ages of 0 and 6. Between 0 and 6, you're more of an unconscious being, meaning everything just goes right in as if it's truth. That way, then they say in biblical terms, if you die in that time period, you go straight to heaven because you didn't have the ability to choose right or wrong at that point. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I really did, I understand totally what whoever it was over there was saying, but I'm thinking that does even just a single little inconsequential thought, would it be like if I step outside, I don't have to have a tornado. There may be just a slight breeze, but it may change my hair.
Yeah,
It makes a slight alteration.
Yeah.
It may flutter the papers.
To me, it's how frequent and how intense the feeling and the thought are. Period. So, for example, if I have it for a moment, and the cool thing about this is I had this experience in one of the last Reiki groups. Is somebody was on the table, and Mary was there. Mary Beth was there. She was part of the thing that happened, and somebody says, "Well, entertain that idea." And as he entertained that idea, his energy changed like that. But here's the thing. You can entertain a positive idea, but how long will you hold it? So your DNA basically is... There's nothing really solid about your DNA except your mental, emotional... The stronger a habit is what your DNA goes by. But it's fluctuating all the time, just like your aura.
Okay, that's what I meant.
So your aura is always...
There's just very faint fluctuations that
unless it
we might
becomes a habit. Once
Yeah.
once something becomes a habit, it's getting closer and closer to be a physical manifestation until finally it will be. But if a thought goes through your mind, it'll make a shift but it won't be so ingrained within you if you can change your mind and let go of it, like Deborah said. However, if you entertain that thought for any amount of time, not only did you went from a thought, but the thought went to the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus releases neurochemicals that tells the pituitary on the end of the hypothalamus to release hormones, which tells the different endocrines to produce this hormone or don't produce this hormone, which is also associated with the chakra system. So right there is the method. Right there is the method. So a thought becomes a neuropeptide, becomes a hormone, becomes a happening in the body. And the longer you do that, so if it's short-lived, like you get angry and then you let it go, fine. If you're angry for weeks, that's high blood pressure. That's something's going to happen. So the longer you entertain something, but here's the crazy thing: is it doesn't take that much of an entertainment for the physical change to happen. It's the stabilization of the thing that's the issue. So right now, basically, your human body is the stabilization of your culminated beliefs and perceptions. You can look at that.
Okay, could you please repeat that? Because I thought it was very important.
Your physical being is the culmination, the collection of all your beliefs and perceptions, expectations, and judgments. That's all it is.
My physical being is the resultant culmination
of your
my
beliefs, perceptions, expectations, and judgments. You change those, your physical body will frickin' change because it cannot go any other way. However, when you're so ingrained to think something, the DNA goes, oh, we do it this way. Oh, we do it this way. And then you go, hey, let's do it this way. And it's like, are you sure? But if you don't keep that up, if you don't keep the new pattern up, it goes right back to the way it was before. It's like rewriting a record. You ever seen a record, like a record player, like the old record, blown up? It's like it's got these grooves in it, these deep grooves.
So does your brain.
Exactly. So when you're going to change the music that you're playing in your mind, you've got to redo those grooves. And sometimes it's easy if it's a simple thing, and sometimes it takes effort, like EFT, Reiki, whatever it is, to smooth out those ridges.
And are you also taking into consideration the things that were seemingly small, or maybe that you weren't that much aware of, like when you were very small, but it gets embedded, it gets deeper, 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 it gets pushed down, shoved down, till you have no earthly idea it's there anymore? Yeah,
the ones that are actually the deepest and that you're most unconscious of actually have the more power, because they're running 24/7 in the back of your head. You may go,
without us knowing it.
Yeah, you may go, well, I get irritated when people, drive slow in the left lane on the highway, which is one of my things. It's like, get the fuck over! It's called the passing line. Anyway, so, sorry, Jim, go ahead.
I just
Deborah does it.
Go ahead. She was first, teacher.
Oh, sorry, Mary.
Everything you're saying is so in line with one of the things that I am rewriting right now. Just the last thing you said, from childhood, when there was sibling conflict, you say you're sorry. I didn't make it happen. She should say I'm sorry, but why do I have to say I'm sorry? I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I have done that for so long that once I realized, I started capturing that. I say I'm sorry for stuff. It wasn't my fault.
Right.
And so you've heard me say I'm sorry. No, I know I take that back.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, my question that I originally raised my hand for was the longer we've had it ingrained, which you ended up saying, the longer it's been ingrained in that, and it goes through the childhood and adolescence and adults and in the workplace and with the sick marriage. Undoing that mindset, not just saying, oh, I'm sorry. The codependent or, the conflicts in any relationship, my mindset was I'm sorry, I'm sorry as though I own the conflict or the problem because it was ingrained there. And I am catching not just when I have blurted, oh, I'm sorry, but I'm catching when I'm having to say, that's not my problem.
Well, consciousness is the number one thing. That's why Buddha showed up before Jesus showed up. Buddha, I mean, people got so much into Buddha to a concept. Buddha took it to an extreme because he was trying to relieve the suffering. And from Buddha's perception, the suffering was the consciousness, the person that wanted or needed or had to have something. So Buddha's answer was, okay, be aware of that, and then don't, just give it up. And to me, there's a balance there. It's not about knowing what you want and going, well, okay, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to give it up. I don't want that. Because that's old energy also. Christ brought in the concept of the love that can only happen if you're conscious. You can only forgive somebody when you become conscious before that. I guarantee you it doesn't happen the other way around. It's usually some kind of aha that happens that changes your mindset. Like, oh, now I see and understand why they did that. Then the love can come in.
Yeah.
You can't make yourself, if you have to work at loving everyone, then you don't have the consciousness yet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not all loving when you're not all loving. What you try to do.
Can I add one thing real quickly? 'Cause
Yeah.
what you were saying is, how, when it goes so deep that you're unconscious, that's the beauty to me of what we do in this group with the mean and tapping. Is because as a group, I know, that's where I see the real work being done in breaking through some of that. And you go, no, I'm not little. And then you go, oh my God. And the tears come.
Yeah.
That's when you've hit it. You're
Yeah.
like, oh my God.
Mhm.
That's where the awakenings have come for me, where I realize where that behavior is coming from. And that's where big changes have happened in my life.
And it doesn't
For the
necessarily
time.
have to be you in the chair.
Right.
No.
I was gonna say that,
Very
and then it raises the consciousness of the whole group.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the
And that's what it is, a consciousness thing, Mary Ellen. So it doesn't have to be that you're conscious of it. A lot of the stuff that really gets us is the stuff that we're
Yeah.
unconscious of.
Yeah.
Like mommy and daddy did this, and I reacted because I didn't want to get hurt. Because your brain is not the enemy. Your brain is there to fix the problem. It's there to solve, like, okay, this feels like shit when this happens. So the brain goes, okay, so what can we do? Okay, I'll be aloof. I won't open my heart anymore. But those patterns are like epigenetic things that rewrite you to the point that, okay, I'm going to have my heart closed to the point that eventually you're going to have carotid arteries. Does that make sense? But that's how fucking intense and literal consciousness rewrites the DNA.
And what happens when children are forced, as they often are, say you're sorry. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're forced to say it when they
yeah,
aren't
and
sorry at
yeah.
all.
Yeah, all of those things happen, and we're going to get into that because the like I said, it's all misperceptions. And to me, it's this: first, it's a misperception, and then it's a judgment, then it's an expectation, and then it's a belief. And once it's a belief, it's really anchored in your DNA.
Would you enumerate those things again?
Oh,
Perception
Perception,
into judgment,
judgment,
expectation, and belief. It's a progression. And once the deeper it goes, if you have a misperception and then somebody corrects you, then you don't have to carry that forward. However, you have that misperception long enough, like...
And the brain starts looking for confirmation of it. See, I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah.
See, I knew that was going to happen. See, people really don't like me. See, I am...
yeah, and so you do, and you wind up creating that for sure. Let me move forward and we'll come back to some of this here. So our DNA, through our ability to simply rewrite our DNA through our consciousness, we have imprisoned ourselves, and we have dropped from being light beings, and light also means lighter, not as heavy, right? So a light being is not only light, but lighter. We become more dense because it's like, here's this thing, and I'm going to add a bunch of stuff to it, and it gets heavier and heavier and heavier. And so what is that? It's like, here we all in a state of grace, heavier, heavier, heavier. Oh, now we're into 4D, 3D. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's the density that happens. So think about it. Are we learning new things or unlearning things when it comes down to being our true selves?
Yes and yes.
We're
So-
unlearning.
I mean, are you really learning anything new?
Yeah, we're unlearning. I agree with the second one.
So it's an undoing as opposed to a doing, in my opinion.
I like it.
So, I mean, anybody else's thoughts?
No, it's like taking off all this crap.
You know, people talk about, oh, I'm in this relationship to learn this. Maybe you're in that relationship to learn that that's a bullshit relationship. You see what I'm trying to say? Oh, I gotta learn my lesson here. I'm gonna stay in this miserable situation because Spirit wants me to. No, it's your bullshit. And you gotta get yourself out of your bullshit. So it's an unlearning, and so we've fallen down in this density to experience density, to go, hey, that density sucks ass. And we've been conned into thinking that that's, you have
burden to bear.
yeah. If you have this illness, God wants you to go through this illness to learn something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, really? I mean, like I've told y'all before, I've only had to let go of a couple of people that I've worked on before, and most of them were strongly religiously programmed. And I was raised Baptist, and I do believe in Scripture, but they were to the point that they could not let go of the concept the script in their body that says, God wants me to go through this.
God, I have to suffer here, so
Oh, yeah.
That is total
Oh,
bullshit.
yeah.
Total bullshit. Because people die for that kind of bullshit. And God doesn't want you to fucking die if you believe that. That's insane. Sorry.
So
No,
is
don't be
it-
sorry.
No, I get on my crazy.
Is it really the complete opposite of what we have been kind of thinking for so many years, that the physical, scientific DNA is the governor of all things, and that we don't have any choice about the DNA?
It is. It
Answer
is.
that with my anecdote.
Yes.
I've seen my DNA printed out 4 times. I've had 4 bone marrow biopsies. It's the only way you can find out. They drill a hole in your butt, they suck out the marrow of the bone, and then they take a chunk of bone and then they send it to the lab.
Yes.
So what happens from that point is, and the reason everybody has to do this so you can see your future, you've got the crystal ball built right in there to answer that question. The reason you don't see your future is because it hurts like hell. If you get it done once, they have to tie you down and hold it down to get it the next 2, 3, 4
Really?
times. And, oh no, that's not, I mean, that will get you some gene information, but to see the DNA.
See, and Jim said it to see your future, because it's exactly what your DNA. Your DNA is your
See
future.
past and your future. So what happens is, through this process, the other reason you don't do it is because it's like $20,000 a pop. And the first time Sue and I went in and had it interpreted by our physician. And so he looks, and the scientists call these markers on your DNA. And that's what John's talking about. These are the markers that your history has chalked up over the years. So you've got, probably somewhere down there smallpox. So scientists only know to recognize the ones that they've seen over and over again. So they know melanoma. And so they go, well, Jim, you got a melanoma marker there? You got that one. Strike 1. Well, there's the mantle cell lymphoma. You got that one, strike 2. Well, my goodness, there's shingles. You got that one too. And just kind of went right on down the line. He says, if this were a lottery ticket, you'd be a billionaire right now because you hit them all. And so, the thing comes around, what about our kids? What about our kids? And he says, that's possibly passed along because those are the markers. Now, here's where it gets fun, because this is where we have the control. It's because it takes triggers. Just because you have the marker doesn't mean it's ever going to surface. Right. Some triggers are things like sunshine for melanoma. Some things are triggers like stress of various forms that take part in whatever part of your body is. But as you go through the entire process, you learn about this. So the whole point behind a stem cell transplant is the idea that they can kill everything in your markers, everything in your bone marrow, completely destroy it down to 0. And then when new stem cells pop out, those new stem cells are fresh and clean and empty, and so you're a newborn baby at that point in time. And that's what they preached, and they said, no, you're going to have to get all your immune system vaccinated and all that kind of stuff when you reach a year, blah, blah, blah. So I was kind of buying into all that. So anyway, went through the whole process, went through the stem cell, and so the last time, my final bone marrow biopsy, I've got the chart laid out there, and I'm worried, the whole time I'm talking about, I've got to stay out of public for a year before I can get a pneumonia shot or a shingle shot or any of those kind of vaccinations. So anyway, here's my thing. So the whole time I'm meditating, I'm doing as much as I can to change my own by visualizing DNA, and there's a lot of YouTubes and things like that out there so you can actually visualize your blood structure, your DNA and all that. So I tried to get all those pictures. So on my last reading, when I went in, there's this giant exclamation mark on my thing. Oh. And she explains everything else. She says, there's no trace of melanoma, there's no trace of cancer in the mantle cells, and blah, blah, blah. And she didn't even talk about the exclamation point. I go, what's that? She looks and she says, oh, that's actually really good news. She said, that, for some odd reason, you kept your immunities, shingles, and all the things we were going to have to vaccinate you for.
So you don't
and so I don't have to do that. And so I said, is that normal? She says, well, this is my first. This is the first time. She says it's possible. It's probable now. And obviously, you were one of the ones that did it. But that's why I believe that you can control your triggers. So,
And rewrite your DNA.
yeah. So go
We
down.
can actually rewrite our DNA.
I believe.
Well, that's what you are. You are rewritten DNA.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Every disease you have is a
Rewrite.
rewritten script, in my opinion.
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying throw medical science out the window, because in some of these cases, people need big boosts, or they need the physical knowledge of being able to wipe that hard drive clean. So they have those advantages. But people that went through what I have don't always survive.
What was
So
your prognosis?
my prognosis was stage 4 mantle cell lymphoma, and the best they could promise was maybe 5 years.
And now you're completely free.
Right now, there's no sign that.
No appendages left.
Well, see, what happened, what he's talking about is basically in his DNA, he had an amendment written, who knows what, from either his ancestor from his mother or ancestors from his father. An amendment was made to the original DNA. It is said, this is now a great possibility within you. When he was reset, those amendments were taken out, which means we can do that ourselves as well.
Because this is what I like, because when you look at all the studies, because there's a lot of studies on mantle cell, when you look at all the studies, sometimes you'll hit that part of the study, patient recovered for no known scientific reason.
That's right.
Right.
And that's what we did. That's why we move on. That's why, and a good example that the speaker, Brother Robin's not here, we give a book report on the speaker the other day, Alvin Wiseman. But one of the things that he said regarding that, I may have to get back to you on that. I can't think of it.
Okay, let's
But
move.
Go ahead.
Let's move forward, and so we can get this done. So yeah, but what Jim is saying is, it's like he had our total resets. In other words, those scripts were wiped off of his DNA. Those epigenetics, in my opinion, and this is where I'm coming from. I'm going from this space, just so you know, because sometimes I throw stuff out there, and I'm not showing you the original vision. The original vision I'm seeing is that the Earth and what we call humanity, what appears to be humanity, which is not humanity, but back at that time period, before any epigenetics had happened, in other words, anything that had come in and altered the original intent of us, of our DNA, of our physicality, those epigenetics have been going on ever since the beginning of time. Okay?
That triggered the smallpox vaccination. When the smallpox vaccination came in, population went from this growth to bam, that growth.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another book.
Yeah, and vaccinations also rewrite your DNA. That's why it's such a big deal when people talk about vaccinations affecting children, like ADD, not ADHD, but autism and things like that, because vaccination goes in and alters your DNA. And there is something to, like, maybe be avoided to a certain degree. Not I'm saying don't avoid medicine.
There's something
To probably be avoided to a certain degree.
Okay.
If you're going to stick something in your body that rewrites your DNA, do you really want that? And do you know what's really in it? Do you really know the pattern that's in there? Conspiracy theory from New Agers is that the autistic people are people that have this high knowledge, highly aware, but they're unable to completely integrate that knowledge into the physical realm. It's like having your upper chakras really open, but then they tighten as you come down. So one conspiracy theory is that the vaccinations are there on purpose to limit the expansion of consciousness in the human race. In other words, it's geared to affect the children that could potentially expand consciousness on the planet. But that's another story.
They look savant in some.
But do you personally, you lean more away from conspiracy?
I'm not trying to get into it. There's some truth to everything.
Sure, yeah.
But my thing is, you got to get down to changing it within yourself. And you can bitch about the world, but the world is simply a mirror of you. Okay, like I said, the Constitution, the American Constitution that has been amended so many times you don't even recognize it as what it was intended to be, is merely a reflection of you, us, being amended, our DNA, through our beliefs, religious programming, morality, all of that has totally amended us to. We don't even know who the hell we really are anymore. We have an idea of the splendor we could be, but it's been so congested, so covered over with junk DNA that we can't even access it completely. So I'm talking about reaccessing it. So we must undo what has happened as a result of the amendments or appendages that have been added to and that clutter our DNA, that have been altered by our consciousness through our misperceptions, negative expectations, and our limiting beliefs. We and nature are partners. So the Garden of Eden, we are meant to be partners. Proper partnering is the name of the game. Only in proper partnering can true love, creativity, abundance, support, nurturing, thriving, and growth, aka the continued expansion of life, happen. So only in that state can it happen. So we started going the other way. We started going dense and contracted. I mean, really think about the expansion that's happened. We've had knowledge expand as far as, technology goes, but as the human goes, what's really the last evolution you saw in the human being? Its true abilities. I believe that we have superpowers, but those have been covered over because I've got some limiter and says I can't do that anymore. It's been activated. So I don't have maybe a physical disease. Maybe being limited is a physical disease. You know what I mean? Maybe dying at a certain age is an epigenic. See what I'm trying to say?
Maybe dying at a certain
Old age. Maybe old age is an epigenic.
Uh-huh.
Maybe that was written onto the DNA that was a limiting switch for us. Does that make sense? Things like, I should have this problem because I'm getting older. We use that language. Well, even if you think that, at the very least, you're scripting your body to have negative effects.
If every cell replaces itself, what, 7 years? 30
Well,
years?
depending on the source. So
Then why should we age at all?
Right. Mm-hmm. We age because the DNA is always being rewritten. So Mary Ellen, take this to another degree. We're rewriting the DNA all the time. You have a thought, you already rewrote the DNA, but you may go back and erase it. Does that make sense? Okay, so you're rewriting that DNA all the time. So when that cell goes to divide, it takes the pattern that it has and expands on that. So instead of having the original DNA that says, I'm a powerful being full of light and love, and it's got all this other crap that's on it, it's going to divide with what it is at that moment. Does that make sense?
Sure.
That's what happens to the human race. We become denser and denser, and so on.
That's why you have some age more than others, or faster than others.
Yeah, you can see that in people. Some people look really young, and some people look older. It's all consciousness.
And you talk about density, but you can also say it in the way Abraham speaks is vibration.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's the same thing. I just like the word dense because dense, when I use certain words, my mind sees it in multiple ways. Dense is also a consciousness idea of not being or knowing something, right? Okay. So we are dense. We have lost our awareness and become funneled down.
Think of population density. In less than 50 years, we have gone to less than 3 billion on the Earth to more than 7 billion on the Earth. But 50 years, think of the entire timeline span that man has been on Earth. And in 50 years, we've doubled density. Doubled our densities.
Kind of crazy there.
Yeah. Cray, vortex.
Vibration, here it comes.
So, from my perception, life is meant to be a dance. Not the type of dance where one leads and one follows, but an instantaneous response to one another. For example, if I see you need something, I respond immediately without you needing to ask. And then the other does the same. So I see that, and then somebody does that for me. That's a relationship, or a higher level relationship. So connected and sync are the two that words aren't even needed. So you've probably been in relationships where, wow, this just flows. You ever work with somebody doing some kind of work and it flows? There's a connection there. There's not a need for a bunch of words to have things happen because you're responding to one another. So, and I'm bringing this in a second, I'll kind of bring this full circle. We've all been in those relationships where it seems efforted. Instead of dancing and flowing with one another, you step on each other's toes. That is an unhealthy relationship no matter how you try to paint it. So here's where our consciousness gets in the way. Or morality. Morality is the biggest, to me, morality is probably the biggest epigenic rewriter in the human race. Religion, hugest. Religion is the source of most of the epigenetic rewriting in our DNA, because one thing, once we get tied into it through our emotional connection, we're totally set into it. So like, for example, you're uncomfortable. Your natural being is like, okay, I've tried, I'm done, I'm moving forward. Morality, epigenetic rewriting in your DNA says, no, I need to try and stay because there's something I should be learning here, and I'm going to learn it. So you stay against your true nature, and nature gets louder and louder and creates more and more dis-ease within your physical body and in your outside body, because it's trying to make you get back into the dance. That's what life's supposed to be, okay? So although there are things to learn within those relationships, I've come to learn that sometimes those types of relationships are simply teaching us that those types of relationships are not good ones. Relationships are meant to be divine and healthy. Partnership is meant to be divine and healthy. We tend to learn what we want by experiencing what we don't want. So it's like, okay, I've had this, I realize that's not what I want, I'm moving on. If you've got some kind of epigenetic limiter in there that says, hey, I got to hang this out, I got to do this, you're going against your natural self. Does that make sense? All of a sudden you're going against, and here's the overlay, because Jim had said something earlier to me, and it was like, we are part of nature just like nature is part of us, okay? Mm-hmm. So it's not just, so we're like a part of the environment as well. So my true nature is also a part of nature, how it works perfectly, right? When we get out of sync with that, nature is going to come back and push on us to get back into the dance. So this next, we'll explain that a little bit more. All of us humans will continue to experience negative relationships, whether it's with the planet, nature, or other people, until we learn that that's not the way it was intended to be. Relationships were not meant to be endured. They are meant to build each other up, support each other, and are focused on growth and expansion of consciousness and understanding. Both parties profit.
If you're in a work environment where you're working with people that don't do that for you, but you don't have a choice. I mean, that's where you work. You have to... Well,
there's always a choice, and you can change that by rewriting your consciousness in the moment. Because in other words, remember I talked about I was going to say this, but I got sidetracked on Jim's thing. I was thinking it when Jim was talking, but by the time Jim made his point... No, but by the time Jim stopped making his point, I lost track of that. But the thing is like Jim already has children, right? Okay, who possibly have that marker that was written into his DNA. We don't know that Jim wrote it, but his ancestors wrote it into the epigenetics, whether it was way back 1,000 years ago or just a couple of hundred years ago, it doesn't really matter. Or if Jim himself did it. The morphogenic field. Okay, the Robert Sheldrake, he's the one that coined the phrase morphogenic field. He had this family of snails, separated the snails by hundreds of miles, did experiments on this one group of snails. The other snails had the reaction. So once you change something within yourself, your morphogenic field changes. That's freaking awesome. That goes beyond just me changing myself. I change everybody else associated with it. So basically what I'm trying to say is Jim, by clearing that, has possibly cleared that for the morphogenic field of his fucking family. That's fucking amazing. Yeah. That's the power we have to change a vicinity that we reside in. Everybody that we come in contact, we can rewrite them simply by our energy field.
So for Jenny, for saying, now what if all these people in my office, so you're saying...
By her changing her reaction, her state of being, she changes that environment, because they're going to start snailing. Laurie and I came up with that term, like probably Laurie. The snailing, you snail off of other people around you. If they're negative, you're going to snail that onto you, okay? But you don't have to be negative. When you're a conscious being, your responsibility is to be fucking conscious, not let it default. So when you're feeling a certain way and getting irritated, you own it and you go, no, I'm changing this. I'm changing my feeling, and I'm going to change the environment.
You had that in your work situation. She has a great example of that.
You want to give that example?
Yeah, I want to hear that, Miss Deborah.
There was
Can you come just a little closer and louder?
There was a girl in my office that was just irritating me to no end because of the fact that she was whiny and needy, and she would just blurt it. She told everybody about it. Okay, so I was like, what is wrong? Why am I mad? Why do I react when she does this? So I started tapping on it, and Bambi and John helped me to see what it was. Actually, it was me. I didn't see her as one with me. I saw her in duality. Her purpose in that office was to do exactly what she was doing. Right. And that was her purpose. That was her way to find love. My way to find love is different than her way to find love, in my words. And so once they showed me that all I have to do is see that her purpose is exactly happening the way it's supposed to be happening in her office, and then who am I to say that, it's wrong or it's right or whatever? Just know that she's one with me. She's the same as I am. She's the same. We're both trying to get to the same place. Her path is different than mine, so just leave her alone with her path. If I mess with her path,
Or try to change her path.
try to change her path, I'm messing with her lesson, and I can't do that. It's not my place. It's not my place.
So how did it appear, the appearance of her change to you, correct? Or the way you perceive her?
Not only the appearance, but the interaction changed.
She comes to me now. She talks to me. She interacts with me and asks me questions about life and what she needs. I mean, it's totally different. Now that I know that you're okay, this is your path. My path may be different, but your path is yours, and I'm not messing with it. So it has been so peaceful for me. It was just peace came over me once I finally started seeing her as who she really is. She is me. She is me. And we're all one. It's just she's got a different path than I do.
And other people are mirrors. So when you run into a problem in your environment, the misunderstanding or the biggest misinterpretation is that person is doing it almost to us, when in reality that person is mirroring back exactly some negative vibe that you have in you that is density. They're bringing the density to your face, because we can have density inside of ourselves and not necessarily see it and have to deal with it, but reality brings the density to us. You think you're a dumbass, then you're going to have a lot of people that bring you that idea and say you're a dumbass. You see what I'm trying to say?
Is this connected with the law of attraction?
No, totally, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Everything is,
Yeah.
I conclude.
Mm-hmm. Because basically with the epigenetics is rewritten by the law of attraction. Or you could say epigenetics is the law of attraction in a way.
It actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're talking about is basically what Jesus had the capability of doing, is to change without saying anything.
Mm-hmm.
His presence was all that there was, and we can get to that point.
Something I was reading the other day, I don't remember where because I read a lot of stuff, but it said if you could just get to the point in your life where you see everyone else as perfectly whole, perfectly whole where they are at that point of their life, whatever they're going through, it's not my job to pick up their stuff. I need to see them as perfectly whole right now. And man, I tell you what, that's a hard one to wrap your head around.
But it's so easy to love when you see that.
Yeah.
It's like you just.
Yeah.
See, but to me that is the God consciousness, and to me, God consciousness is what I'm talking about. God consciousness is the original script within us.
Right.
That's what's got covered over. God consciousness is our natural given right.
And we're
And
usually
God-
our own worst enemy.
Yeah, so God consciousness is what's been written over. Because if you can be in the God consciousness, that's why I started having these realizations that you're not going to change the world. I need to accept whatever's going on there, because when you really think about it, God is doing that. God's consciousness is, you know what, you're learning that. If I took that away from you, I'm actually taking your free will to choose for yourself.
Your opportunity.
Even no matter how negative that is, you have to have the freedom to do that. When we're in duality, we're saying, oh, that's horrible. We got to change it. We got to give peace to the entire planet. Good luck with that. Because that means you're going to take away a bunch of people's free will. All you do is you change your own epigenetics, and by being in other people's presence, they're promoted or maybe have an incentive to shift.
Okay, now just a few minutes ago, did you say, John, that morality is what is messing up?
I think morality writes a lot of epigenetics for
Okay,
sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
And I think that comes a lot from religion. You know, okay, your natural self, every living thing goes towards what feels good and feeds them and gets the fuck away from what doesn't. If I'm in something where I'm feeling starved and I'm dying and I stay there, that's going against my natural program. It's insanity. It is fucking insanity. Plain and simple.
Is it fair to say that if you were talking about nature is trying to
Nature, okay, this is where I'm getting this.
back?
Let me go with this, because this is where this comes in. Okay. When we do something or experiencing something against our true nature, remember, we're supposed to be in a dance with nature.
Yeah.
If I'm feeling something and it doesn't feel good to my natural self, I need to act, and I do it now. If I see you struggling over there, I help you. I don't wait till you're fucking on the floor. So nature does that too. But nature is only gonna, you gotta have the response. So when your nature goes, this sucks, and you go, well, I think I'm supposed to learn something. We had some past life issues, and the Catholic preacher said that, love your neighbor. If I get a divorce, I'm going to hell. That's bullshit.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
All of that is epigenic bullshit that is really fucking you over. So when we do something or experiencing something against our true nature, nature begins to nudge you. Okay? It's saying, hey, come on, dance. You stop dancing. Okay? Now, it gets more and more intense the longer you stay stuck. So, however, if we do not adjust and move ourselves instantaneously to the dance at hand, we get out of step with ourselves and nature. That's when we get stuck in a rut. We're no longer dancing. We get out of step with our true nature. Then life becomes stances, stuck frozen states, instead of dances. Nature will bring to us circumstances that force us to let go of those things we are doing or holding on to that goes against our true nature.
Calls us the word stuck, stop, stay.
Huh?
All the words that go along
Yeah.
with it. Static.
Static.
Spaces.
Mm-hmm. It's like music. Music is not static. It's fluctuating. It's all over the place.
Dances.
And the only
Dynamo,
cells that don't die
dynamic.
naturally in the body were the only cells that don't have a life cycle, cancer cells. They don't die.
And what happens is you begin to move again if you listen. But sometimes that nature has to push so hard that sometimes that push is death. Sometimes that push is it's going to move you into the next movement, which is your next life, because you just cannot get it this time. Does that make sense? So it's up to you to give when nature pushes you into movement. If you don't give, then your life is going to give in some way. So getting us back in the flow, back into the dance, so that's the nature and how we dance together. And we're writing each other's epigenetics and future, like Jim said. Our DNA is our future.
Well, is it fair to say or not? Is it fair to say, you said that the morality, also known as religion, is what is messing things up?
No, not the only thing, but it's a large source. Yeah.
It is a huge
Mhm.
bit of what's messing us up. Is it fair to say that in nature,
There is no morality.
there is none? It's
No.
not good or bad.
No.
It just is what is needed at the
Yeah,
moment.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. If you're in a relationship and it feels good, it's right. When it stops feeling good, it really has ceased to be right. Okay? Simple. So for me, it is not about surrendering to nature, but properly partnering with spirit. It's like saying, I'm here to dance with you and delight in all of life and what we can and will create as we expand our consciousness and our love. And it's not a partnership where it's like they lead, I follow, I lead, they follow. It's always a shifting and a moving. It's not a dominance or a following. Just like when you're really in a good relationship, there's a response to something you do, and vice versa. It's instantaneous. It's easy. When you're beating your head against the wall, it's telling you this is no longer natural. When it's not natural, it's unhealthy. And if you try to change it and it doesn't get back in line with nature, then the best thing for you is to get out of alignment with that, because now you're not in line with nature. And if you're not in line with nature, eventually you will die. And we create that death, not like natural death, but you're going to create your own death, because
What?
it's stagnation is death.
Okay.
When a living thing has movement to it,
Then is there a natural death?
that's something else we could talk about another time. I have my own thoughts about that.
That's what I'm interested in.
I want to get back to the dying, and there are dead people walking around, I can tell you that.
Oh yeah, definitely. Zombies. Zombie. See, huh? Yeah. Yeah, and I really think that, the consciousness, whenever somebody writes something or does a movie or does some kind of media, you can't help but put collective consciousness into it. So all the zombie movies, all the, it's like, I noticed.
The Walking Dead.
Yeah, and I know somebody that's into modeling and stuff like that. It's a huge thing in modeling. This guy that's got all the, is like tattooed up like a total complete skeleton. And you see the people that are modeling like zombie. But that's the reflective from the collective that we have become half dead, half alive beings. And that's what's written into our genetics. We're writing ourselves into being zombies and not fully alive.
Well, why are we doing it?
Well, we picked up epigenetics from other people. It's like,
TV, anything. Society tells you that's what you're supposed to do.
yeah, it's happened slowly over time. It's like the thing about a frog. If I dropped you into hot water, you would fight against me because the heart was hot. But if you were in water and I slowly turned the heat up over a long period of time, you would die before you ever noticed it was hot.
That's what I do in my shower. I like the hot water.
Yeah.
Slowly turn it up.
Yeah, but you slowly turn it up so you can adjust to it. So that's what's another thing that's happened is we slowly epigenicked ourselves into a physical prison. So DNA is no longer the spiritual powered things that we could have possibility have, like Jesus healing and things like that. Think about this group. We're able to read each other's thoughts. We're able to see into someone's body. We can feel things. We can adapt it. Those are superpowers that everyone has that we've been epigenicked out of. And so another cool thing about epigenetics is it doesn't have to be like a tapping or a reikiing. It can be an aha. Something forces you into an awakening that goes beyond your limited perception that your epigenetic DNA is saying is impossible. If you have one of those life-altering happenstance, then you get rewrit that quick.
Okay, can I ask you this, just in a nutshell or whatever? What were you attempting with the blood red moon and what you started talking about at the very beginning?
Well,
what were you? I didn't get to go.
I was just saying that the people that were there, part of my intent was getting Wichita Falls back into its intended Garden of Eden state of being. Okay. And that meant that everybody was there was also the underlying intent was to get everyone else in the same thing. So this is just an extension of that. So it's not just about getting the plant to thrive, because here's the thing, is our consciousness, I totally believe that the people that were involved in that, 25 plus people, altered how Wichita Falls is working as a living being. And every city is its own living being. It has its own very specific consciousness. You can go to Dallas, the consciousness is different. Those people are different because they're a collective morphogenic field. Wichita Falls is the same way. So it's, in my opinion, it's light workers' ability and responsibility to be the ones that are the ones aligning the place that you're living with spiritual, natural, intended life. That's our purpose. It's the white blood cells. We even use the term in the body. In the white blood cells, the white light workers are the ones that maintain the balance in the body. That's their purpose.
And it must be exciting for you to see, the growing community of light workers. You've been doing this for a while, but it just seems like now that there's a momentum just by the classes and the group going.
Yeah, there is a shift changing, for sure. And I'm having to adjust that to myself in a way. Some limits have come to my focus. And here's the crazy thing is, I don't want to say that on public. Well, okay, in my previous marriage, I got to this point where I was feeling really overburdened, that it became my natural daily mental talk, to the point that I kind of basically had, and I came up with this script over the weekend. I think it was Friday when I was working on myself. And the script was, I'm feeling worn down, worn out, and everything is a chore. That's what I was telling myself, to the point that even though I left the situation, I didn't change completely because I still had that program going on. Which means that program, if you have that program, think about what you're doing to the DNA in your body. You're saying, okay, adrenals, you're going to be on more. Okay, your digestive system is going to be shit. Okay, your energy level is going to be shit. Because my thought, even though I had more time and I should have had more energy, the script, because your script is written by your consciousness. I was telling myself to behave this way. We're telling ourselves all the time to be.
Still there working.
Yeah.
The appendage was still there.
That's
so
why
it
you
still
right.
had its energy going.
Right. So my body, like I said, my body is the collective of my consciousness, perceptions, judgments, and misbeliefs. That's all I am. I am a concept. Me, John, is a concept. And I can change it like that if I choose to. And the more light you become, the more ability to change that happens. When you're really dense, it may take an affirmation that you repeat for a year to change something. The lighter you become, hey, you can tap on it in 2 weeks. Boom, something has changed. All of a sudden I have more energy. You have more energy because your body is working like it's supposed to. You don't have a script saying in there, okay, I'm tired. And so I'm tired. I'm telling my adrenals, don't work. I don't consciously say don't work, but I guarantee you that script has that built into it. Does that make sense? It's that much of an overlay. It's that much of every disease is a misperception, judgment, script that we're writing to cause an illness. That's why and nature shows us those things. It says, hey, this is trying to tell you something. If you can read the language, you can find the script and you can change the script and remove it, like with Jim talking about them going out and getting rid of it.
And his medication certainly, enabled those other markers to stay there, so he didn't have to do that.
Mm-hmm. See, and he also added stuff to it. It just wasn't the doctor, because there was somebody else that had the same thing at your same time, right? Is that person still around?
I'm sorry, I was flipping out on a Gibran quote, in the stillness you will find the dancing. So that's where my brain is going. So, yes,
That
your
is
question.
so true.
Wasn't there somebody else diagnosed around the same time period you were? What were you telling us about that? I can't remember. Or the same thing.
Was it still or had the same treatment?
He had a different treatment. He went a different route.
Oh, I just ran into a guy, and I don't even know if it was the same lymphoma. There's like millions of different kinds of lymphomas. But yeah, I think it was just an interesting anecdote that he couldn't do autologous, and he got this is what it was. He got his sister's stem cells, and now when they do his bone marrow biopsy, he shows up as a sister. He has his sister's identical.
That's pretty cool.
Because it's not stem cells. Stem cells haven't been written.
Well,
right.
Pattern.
It actually is. I don't want to go into the whole detail, but they still do the kind of boosting of that person's, and they do collect that person's stem cells. But the DNA is a female, and it's from her body, and so when it changed his, it just rewrote him as her.
And see, it's like when they do when they do like organ transplant, you have to suppress that person's immune system because they're saying, hey, that's not me.
Right.
So that shows you how much your consciousness governs what happens in your body. So basically, when you do something like that, I think about it this way. I'm taking this consciousness out of this person, and I'm transplanting that consciousness into this person. This consciousness is, I'm not sick. This consciousness is, I'm sick, and you can transplant that.
Because people who have different people's hearts, they start having different cravings.
Yeah.
I mean,
There's morphogenic fields in all those things. I mean, Laurie told me one time about
Liver story.
Yeah, this guy that had this middle-aged white guy had a liver transplant. He got a liver transplant from a black guy, and his member grew about 3 to 4 inches as a result of the liver transplant. Because the liver transplant has a lot to do with your hormonal conversion. Yes. And you think about, and this is not to be racist or anything, but black guys can be, we use the term cocky. I mean, there's a sexual reference there. Cocky and things like that. So he became more cocky because of the liver energy signature from the other person. So literally, it's almost like he, instead of tapping, he just got a total, here you go. this is what you are now. And imagine the DNA, it's almost, to me I almost see it like, what is it called when you have a plant grafting? It's almost like you grafted that consciousness. So when you graft something on a plant, you're mixing different consciousness. So basically, the liver was grafted into him, which means a certain amount of consciousness was grafted in. It'd be really good, I think, interesting to do a whole study on what changed as far as his behavior, too. Yeah. Did he become more cocky and things like that?
Better and better.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, John, I don't have a grasp of what you were trying to do, what you were doing on
My
that-
focus of
on the
of the
That was where all the planets were aligned for this big intent change, if you wanted to
Yeah.
take
And-
advantage of that.
and my intent was to align us to that, and it was also to awaken our superpowers that have been dormant. Like I said, like healing is a superpower. I mean, I think everybody has that superpower, but we've lost it. We've lost touch with it.
But it
So
was giving birth to a new
Yeah.
way of becoming.
mhm.
Okay,
returning-
But if I missed it because I was out of
Well, you're part of the morphogenic field.
Yes, yes.
You didn't miss it.
Yeah.
So to answer that question is you could hang out of group for a while and you're still going to get some morphogenics. But if you stay out, let's say 6 months to a year, that connection to that morphogenic field begins to cease. Does that make sense? Because
Yeah.
it's like you meet somebody that you haven't talked to in a while, you have a hard time connecting with them. It's because the morphogenic field fell out of concordance.
Yeah.
I do have to respond to this.
Okay.
Because I've looked into Reiki stuff, and here's this red moon thing, and I'm thinking,
Here's this one.
the red moon
Oh, okay,
thing, and I
yeah,
think,
okay, the
"Ooh."
red moon
And
thing.
I'm watching all the little moon, I'm watching all that to get ready for it, and I had a level of anticipation that there was going to be a moment, because I got to go to this, and I'm at that vortex, and there's this portal that's going to be open, and I'm expecting Scotty beam me up. Well, there was a whole bunch of people there I'd never met before, and I'm walking into this circle, and these people are hugging me like better than my family hugs me, and I'm feeling this oneness. And so I'm thinking, yeah, it's going to happen. We sit down, and we're going to do this, and John starts talking, and if you look at the pictures, I didn't get nothing out of the actual thing. Maybe it was because my expectation was here, therefore
Mhm.
I didn't get what I wanted. But at some point when I settled down and quit being in my head and just started breathing, and I let go of all my expectation, I went inside and expanded. I have no words for it. I did not feel voila about it or anything. I just got quiet and I quit thinking.
Okay.
I just quit thinking. And I left that place other than liking the hugs and my perfectly shaped little boiled egg. And people held my quartz for me. I mean, there are things that I walked away that I was glad I got to be there, but I had no concept that anything had happened with what he's talking about now. One thing we did before was what the 4 things were. We wrote down for what was the 4 things. I bet y'all can name them. I can't now.
Peace, balance, freedom,
And
superpower.
attunement.
Attunement, yeah.
Attunement. Okay, so I did. I wrote that down, and we were probably just supposed to write one word, but I put it sideways and I divided that into 4, and I filled every freaking column. Some of it was physical needs, some was this, some was that. I didn't pull that thing out for a couple of weeks. I didn't remember what the 4 things were. I didn't remember what I'd written down, 70 things per each kind of thing. Pulled it out a couple of weeks later and realized things had been happening without my intent.
Well, your intent was already put into
Well,
it.
it was,
Without, yeah.
but what I've done before, when I feel like I've heard a word from God, then I get real good at obeying and doing what I think He wants me to do and screw it up, and it doesn't happen. So you get mad at God because He told me this was going to happen. It didn't. I think it was because I just let it go, and it wasn't like I was disappointed. It was like, yeah, I got hugged by a lot of people, and, that was good enough for me.
If you never have an expectation, you're never disappointed.
That's true. On the other hand, if we're doing the law of attraction, there's something about a positive forward thought,
I think it's
which I'm learning how to do it without expectation.
that's the dance part. Because if you have no expectation, that's what Buddha's talking about. Well, okay, I don't care what happens.
The 2 things
I don't want to live like that. But.
I needed to say was, you didn't miss anything, because whatever you're getting, you're going to get it. Maybe we could have another ritual or something, and you could feel like you didn't get anything, but really you do. And I know, I love your questions, but You are so much like me. Maybe you're so in your head, you're just not, take everything he says and just breathe it in, and it's all gonna. I'm finding everything he says like puzzle pieces, and then all of a sudden it's like, here's this one that
Two will come together.
and they come together, and the pieces are fitting together as I need them to.
That's a beautiful one.
And but Mary Beth, basically, in the ritual was the intent set forward. When you tap sometimes, the change is not instantaneous. When you have an energy session, you may not get off the table healed, but a pattern or a frequency or a vibration had been set up to continually work on your system. Usually it takes 24 hours for any kind of energy work to really go through all the meridian system, chakras and things like that. But it's a perpetuating forward movement. From that moment, something has shifted. So maybe you have you've had the moments where you meditate, oh, I see colors and groovy, and I'm floating through space on a whale, and there's music everywhere. And then there's time you're meditating like, fuck, it's just taking forever, I'm really pissed off. And sometimes those are the most transforming because they brought to the surface the crap that you needed to get out of your system. So it's the judgment of what the experience is that fucks it up usually.
Good point. Which is your morality point.
So
you
once
have an expectation of how it should go, and if it doesn't go that way, then you are stuck in that. Oh, that's not what I expected, and I wanted it to go like this, rather than just doing.
It was just like 2012, I thought something like I was going to wake up the next day and the world was going to be transformed.
Right.
It was going to be green and beautiful, and it was going to be my version of heaven. And when that didn't happen, I was one pissed off.
I was at the Mayan pyramids in Mexico on that day laughing at everybody there. It was fucking hilarious. There was people in white with these red things under their eyes walking around these zombies. I'm like, nothing's going to happen. And nobody in my family would go with me. They all stayed at the resort. I'm like, if I don't come back, I've been lifted up, but I'll see you guys at dinner.
See, but it was the potential what that was planted. Just like when Christ came in, there was a potential planted. When Buddha was here, a potential was planted, and it unfolds. Anytime there is an age shift, like for example, we're just now moved to 2012 was really the moving finally into the Aquarian age. From the Pisces age where Christ, the fish, is Pisces, has been the symbol. There's no accident by that. So the ages overlap though, okay? So the people like us are kind of ahead of the wave, but as time passes, you see things that are in alignment with the new way that's happening. It doesn't go boom like that. If it went boom like that, we wouldn't really want that. That's when the earth would totally fall apart. And you hear about polar shifting happening. That happens all the time. It's not about the plates of the world changing. It's like over in the East, they've always been spiritual. It's always been focused on the whole group. Here in the West, it's always been about the individual. It's all about the the lower chakras. They've been about the upper chakras and the whole. That polarity shift happened during that time period. That's why and people look at that, oh, there was no polar shift. Hell yeah, there's a polar shift because all of that spirituality is now over here, and now they're catching up to us. All the technology, all that crap went over there. They're going through what we learned, and now we're getting the balance there. Because here's the thing. Any extreme is fucked up. If you're like, okay, I'm all about myself and nobody else, that's bad. And if you're all about everybody else and not about yourself, that's bad. Because when communist China went over, they wiped their ass. They wiped them out because they didn't have any personal power. That's the balance. That's what went from here over to there. And now we're supposed to take our personal power and learn how to use it in unison. No one is better than the other. It's always the middle row. I'm an individual, but I'm also tied to other people. I'm just as important as the whole. The whole is just as important as me. So when I change my epigenetics, when I change my focus, I affect everybody else's morphogenic field just by being around them.
Very good.